Hello, U.S. History students. You have the lovely opportunity today to go through a review module for the test on Tuesday. Again, you should have finished up all the notes on A House Divided. You also should have the notes from the previous section. I think Olivia, some of you sent those to me already. I don't need them yet. What I'd like to have is those notes filled out, the guided notes for both sections, given to me when you turn in your test via email. Just send me some pics of those notes, or if you've done them digitally, just send those to me to make sure that you, for completion credit, will have that done. So on Tuesday, you'll have really two things to do. One is complete the test, send it back in me by the end of the day. That's very important, by the end of the day. And two, in that same email, just attach onto their pics or the notes that you have filled out for the two sections, both of The Empire Strikes Back and A House Divided, right? Those two sections. So that's what's going to happen on Tuesday to help prepare you for Tuesday. And I hope that you, over the weekend, study up and do it this way. There's a lot of information. Anything from antebellum period or from the Civil War-ish time, I could test you on so much. Hey, AP US History. I'm not. I'm going to be testing you on certain things. I'm guiding you in that fashion today. For those of you who have had me, which is the majority of you in third and fifth hour, hint, 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 you should know this, that what I do in the review is very much similar, eerily similar to what you'll see on the test on Tuesday. Like almost verbatim. Okay, I don't know how much more clear I could get. What I worry about is as I go through this review module, students afterwards will say, okay, that's nice, and then start freaking out like the test. Like, calm down, focus on what's here in the review module, and you're going to be okay. You're going to be okay. So that's the idea. For those of you who had me for geography, for those we didn't have summative assessments, like in the end, some big test on it. We had formative assessments based on your UN discussions and such like that. That was your main assessment. And then for World Civ, we did have some more open-ended answers, right? Those short answer questions. I'm trying to give you a couple different, you'll still have short answer questions on this, but being that you're juniors mostly, I'm trying to help you stretch your boundaries and helping you see not just the short answer questions, which we'll get to at the end, hint, hint, but there's three other sections that you're going to get to. And one of them is going to be fill in the blank, one of them is going to be true and false, one of them is going to be matching, and then, of course, short answer. These are not essay questions. These might have like a paragraph minimum or 2 paragraph minimum. It'll stay on the actual question. But they just need to be paragraph answers, complete sentences answering the question. You don't need an essay or a thesis statement or even topic sentences, just paragraph form answering the question. So that's the format of the test. That alone is helpful. But let's get into our lovely review game, in which I have candy to help distribute. But since none of you are here, I guess it's all for me. So we would normally divide into 2 teams and all that stuff, but we don't have anybody here. So here is the review game. All right, first one. I wish I had some game show music going on here. And this is a 46-point test, just to give you an idea. Basically about 10, 10, 10, and 15, 16 points are on the final section. All right, first one. After the election of 1796, blank became president and blank became vice president. This is a 2-point question. Yes, Brooklyn, wait, the correct answer is, so after the election of 1796, where these two guys didn't get along with each other, and ding, 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 you got it. A shorter, fatter, bald dude named John Adams became president, and Jefferson became vice president. The taller, more regal Jefferson was the indentured servant, if you will, for Adams. And that was the breakdown, right? Adams, Jefferson. Okay. So 2 points to the non-existent team. Second question. The 3 French ministers who demanded a bribe from America were codenamed, right? Hunter Spackman. You guys should know this. I think some of you covered this in your last class. X, Y, and Z. Yes. X, Y, and Z. That's what their codenames were, trying to call them out, but without like totally exposing them. Exposed, sort of, as they demanded that bribe. Okay, third question. In the election of 1800, Thomas Jefferson tied with... Ooh, it's cold in here. There must be some burrs in the atmosphere. Get it? Because it's like cold. I'm chilly here. All right. I'm trying anything to help you guys remember these things. But yes, Jefferson tied with Burr. Eventually, Hamilton broke the tie, or we think he helped break the tie by giving allusions and besmirching the name of Burr. Okay, so Aaron Burr is the guy who tied with him. He eventually was VP, they broke the tie and so forth. Okay, question number 4. The War of 1812 was caused in large part by Britain's use of... What's that formal word? I'm not going to accept like taking people from ships and putting them on your ships and making them fight for your country. Remember, Britain was very busy trying to fight with France and all this stuff and Napoleon and all that, and it just wasn't going well. And then they were taking U.S. soldiers and sailors and taking them and putting them... I don't want to impress you with the answer, but impressment. Impressment. Yep. Now, I'm not going to be too much of a stickler on spelling, but you got to get it pretty close. Like, if you're writing impresario, like that's not it. But if you have impressment with two T's, I won't ding you on that. And these are fill in the blank. There's not like a word bank on this. This is fill in the blank. Okay, fifth one. During the War of 1812, Britain invaded America and burned a big area of blank to the ground. What city? Now, this is important because another city was like blown up and stuff, but not burned. This specific one was burned. Washington, D.C. Yes, I'll accept D.C. Washington, in context here that works, so we don't, Washington as a state hadn't existed then, so we'll accept it. But Washington, D.C. to the ground. Okay, number 6, Keziah knows this one. Because I know she paid attention, and she saw the weirdness of this section, and she'll get it. To encourage people to come visit him, Andrew Jackson put blank in the White House foyer. Cheese. Yes, that's right. That's right, Keziah. Cheese is the answer. Jackson put cheese in the White House foyer. Absolutely. Okay. Let's see. Number 7. When settlers first came to America, most thought of Indians as blank. So when settlers first came to America, most thought of Indians as blank. I will not accept savages. That's not correct. It's a 2-word answer. Noble savages. Noble savages. Okay. Number 8. The blank allowed the national government to force Indians to sell their land. All right, there was a national act that was there. It forced them to sell their lands. It was called, that's right, Ellie, it's called the Indian Removal Act. So you can't just say like the Indian Act. That won't be full credit. The Indian Removal Act. Yep. Allowed the national government to force Indians to sell their land. Okay, number 9. Those who did not believe slavery should be allowed in any new state believed in the idea of, notice here I'm not saying they believe they got to get rid of everything because that's more of abolitionists, which we'll get to a little bit later. But those who believe that slavery shouldn't be allowed in any new state believed in the idea of, ding, 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 free soil. Yes, free soil. Ty's got this next one because it's a fancy word and he's fancy. I mean that as a compliment. Those who believed the people of a new state should vote whether or not to allow slavery believed in, right? So it's not going to be free soil where it's like you don't even get a vote. This is the idea of voting to kill somebody who doesn't even get a vote in their own fate. Popular sovereignty. Okay, in this case, it's called popular sovereignty. Other contexts, it means, the right to self-determine and stuff. This is specific to the Civil War era of the idea of you getting to vote if you allowed slavery or not. Popular sovereignty. Okay. So we got that for popular sovereignty. Remember, there's all these like Band-Aid type experiences of compromises. Whether it was the Missouri Compromise, which basically allowed for Missouri to come in as a slave state and Maine to come in as a free state to sort of balance it. Henry Clay tried to gather that together and created sort of that line from 1820 on. They said that anything, like Missouri's the one exception, but anything new that's a state that's north of 3630 parallel would not be a slave state. And that was the Missouri Compromise. Compromise 1850 allowed for California come in, not a slave state, and Texas and Oklahoma, allowed for a couple to come in as slave states, a couple not to be slave states, and also dealt with some of the weird border lines between Texas and Oklahoma. Also dealt with, it was also a deal that the U.S. would take on the debt that Texas had, like the Lone Star Republic, but also bail us out. So I know Texans are very proud of that, but they also need the federal government from the get-go to bail out some of their debt. So they had that, and they had the Kansas-Nebraska Act, which allowed for popular sovereignty, like go do it and flood the state to vote. And so that's where popular sovereignty was used, and Bleeding Kansas was. Okay, now we're on to the true and false section. Now here's a tricky one. Remember, on this test, I'm not requiring you to write why it's true or why it's false. You have to just say true or false. Now also, if you are doing it handwritten, which is okay on the test I give on Tuesday, if you print it off, take a picture of it front and back and send it to me, that's acceptable. Unlike an assignment, I'm not requiring you to type it. I'd imagine most of you will. But if you do the true and false and you just write like T or F, you got to make that capital, and it has to be clear. I've had kids who try to game the system who are like, is it a T or is it an F? I don't know. You decide, Mr. Peer. No, it's got to be clear. Otherwise, I'll just mark it wrong. All right. The true or false? The Democratic Republicans, led by John Adams, believed in the letter of the Constitution 75% of the time and the spirit of the Constitution 25% of the time. False. That is correct. Kaylee, you are right on. That's false. That's false for a couple of reasons. John Adams didn't lead the Democratic Republicans. That's wrong. And the Democratic Republicans didn't believe in a 75% and 25% split. That would be instead, for some points, let's see what we got. Jaden, yes. Some points being that it would be the Federalists who believed in that breakdown, whereas the Democratic Republicans believed in more of a 100% letter of the Constitution, except for Louisiana Purchase, All right. So that's false. All right. 12. Napoleon started the quasi-war with America. Or the quasi-war, however you want to say it. Quasi-war with America. False. For some points, Mitchell, yes. The correct answer would actually be he helped end the War of 18... he helped end the quasi-war with America because he came on the scene and France was like, we're not going to worry about the U.S. anymore. So we dodged a bullet there. That would be false. All right, number 13. Aaron Burr won the duel with Alexander Hamilton. True. For most and all of our intents and purposes, he won it. He may have half-cocked the pistol, and did he break law, and he jumped across the state border to do it? Yeah, all those things. But he got a pardon eventually, in a way, so he was all right, and he'd come back and work in the federal government. but he did technically win the duel. True. 14, Francis Scott Key wrote the national anthem. True. Yeah, I mean, I'm not getting too tricky here. Like, yes, it did take, eventually Herbert Hoover eventually made it where it was the national anthem. Woodrow Wilson had some say in it, but Herbert Hoover did it. Yeah, it eventually, was categorized as the national anthem. Prior to that, it was just a patriotic song, hymn, if you will. But yeah, Francis Scott Key wrote the national anthem. True. All right. 15, America won the War of 1812. False. There's no real winner. It dissolved. To this day, there wasn't a real treaty between the U.S. and Britain, as Britain had to deal with France and just they got busy. So, no, Britain, that's false. Britain nor America won the War of 1812. Okay, 16. Under Andrew Jackson, all people were allowed to vote. I know the instinct would be like, oh, yeah, that sounds right. Ada, that might be like, yeah, I know, because Andrew Jackson. Nope. That's still false. Help us out here. Jaden, any thoughts for some points? Why is it that that's false? All white men were allowed to vote under him. And he wasn't the only precipitating factor. It was a move and a trend. But no, he wasn't the only one. But yeah, all white men were allowed to vote. But minorities, marginalized groups, females, not allowed to vote still. So that's why that's false. Okay. The Trail of Tears extends from Georgia to Oklahoma. 800 miles, 600 miles. True. Yes. That's the weird sorted marker that starts it is in Georgia, and it's like a weird part of our nation's history. Yes, that is true. Okay, 18. Southern chivalry came about in part because of the shortage of women in the South. Now, this is hard. We alluded to it when I was mentioning it, but I didn't have you write it down specifically. True. Yeah, I talked about it a bit, but it's true. The ratio for men to women, there were so few women in the South because a lot of these were plantations, big, large estates, and women weren't there in terms of population numbers. So the few who were there, the men were outnumbering them 3-1 or so, and so the women had a greater chance in choosing, if you will, of their prospective partner. And so that meant that the men sort of had to increase in the sense of nobility and propriety out in public to help woo them. So yeah, that's true. All right. Now, this is, I hope you guys get what I'm saying here in the next question. Number 19. In the whole world, America was the last to abolish slavery. Ooh, that sounds tempting. Mikkel, that sounds tempting. Ooh, yeah, I think I wrote something about that in my notes. That's false. That's false, Mikkel, because America was of the developed democracies, France, Britain, etc., Netherlands, the last to abolish slavery, but not in the whole world. You had African countries who still did it, weird caste systems in India that were de facto slavery. Yeah, no, the U.S., that's false. They weren't the last to abolish slavery. Okay. 20, last true and false one here. The Compromise of 1850. Missouri Compromise and Kansas-Nebraska Act were permanent solutions to the problems of slavery. True or false? Let's see. See if anybody knows this one. Gracie, you're right. That is false. Those are temporary Band-Aids. Henry Clay trying to pull together tethers and weird extraneous parts of the U.S. and keep it together, but very much Band-Aids at best. These were not permanent solutions. In fact, the Missouri Compromise was sort of negated from the Kansas-Nebraska Act. So no, that was false. Okay, now to our third section, which is going to be matching. I should say this, but as an FYI, I was toying. I created the tests as this way in order to do more of like proficiency-based grading, where you can notice that the most basic level here is going to be true or false, right? Your 50-50 chance. The next one is a little bit better is matching, where like there's sort of a bank that you choose from and you match. The next level is going to be fill in the blank. The final one is going to be more of like analysis, your depth of knowledge, level 4, so to speak. And that's free response. And I was going to do like a score of 1, 2, 3, 4, like if you showed proficiency of getting like 7 or 8 out of the 10 in each respective section, you'd be at least at a 1 or a 2 or a 3 or a 4. It's like a D, C, B, A. But with the whole COVID-19, I think I'm just going to keep it simple and not go that route, and just keep it, normal grading scale. Just full disclosure on that. But as I've been thinking more, I'm just going to keep it simple and just, each one's worth a point, and there you go. It's 46 points. Okay, just I do care about like evolution of grading practices, and some math teachers, etc., will have like a 1, 2, 3, 4 proficiency breakdown, and I'm trying to go that way, but we probably won't. Okay, let's do. Okay, let's go into the matching. I guess let's do it this way. This group believe the Constitution gives power to the national government. That would be Federalists. This group believes that the Constitution gives power to the national government. Federalists believe that it did, right? Democratic Republicans didn't. In fact, the next question, this group believe the Constitution limits the power of the national government. And that would be the Democratic Republicans. That's exactly right. Bethany, you were right on that one. 5,000 life points. 10 out of 10. Man, I miss you guys. I really miss you guys. All right. So yes, Democratic Republicans believe the Constitution limits the power of the national government. All right, next one. The national anthem was written here. At what battle, I should say? What battle? Battle of Gettysburg. Battle of Vicksburg. No. Battle of Baltimore. Okay, that was the city. Battle of Baltimore. That's where it was written. Okay. Next one. The practice of firing the previous staff and hiring a completely new one is known as, think about milk that's been in the whole fridge for too short of a time and milk that's been left out too long. It gets spoiled. It's the spoil system, right? This is the practice of firing the previous staff and hiring a completely new one. All right. Next one. This person was often thought of as the people's president. Yes, the Democrat of all Democrats. People's president. Big blocks of cheese, inauguration people hanging from chandeliers and urinating on curtains. It was great. That president was called Andrew Jackson. That's right, Andrew Jackson. All right. This person led a group against the national government. All right, so that's a sort of general one, but in context of everything else, Native American, leader of the Fox tribe, or a leader there, his name was Black Hawk. Okay, this group was pushed out of Georgia into the Trail of Tears. Now, mind you, there's several. I mean, the Creek, the Choctaw, the Chickasaw, but we're looking for one, Cherokee. Yes, Cherokee is the one that's listed there in your little word bank. Yes, Cherokee. Okay. The next one is, this group has the best track record at taking a stand against the national government. So I listed 4, right? They were involved in Trail of Tears. This one wasn't. They won successful battles, etc., and resisted them. And that group's called Seminole. Yes. Yes, Seminole Tribe. All right. This is what many Southerners called slavery. They knew it was a little different, not inherently evil in their minds, but, part of the greater good. And that's what they called it, and it's called peculiar institution. Peculiar institution. All right, and last one for matching. This group, Whigs, eventually turned into this group due to respect for law's equality. Whereas before they were a opposition party to the Jacksonian Democrats, they said, let's have not just be reactive, let's be proactive, and let's say our platform is like white, black, otherwise we're all equal under the law because the law is the highest power. Not a Jackson figure, not a president, not even the people, but the law is the highest power. They then were called, you got it, Republicans. Republicans, indeed. Araya, you got that. Here is an airhead for you that I don't want to eat and get into a diabetic coma, but if you don't see any videos from me next week, that's why. And on that note, Tuesday you won't be seeing any videos from me, right? Because that is the last day before, obviously, spring break. And so I guess this will be the last video until school resumes on the... Let me make sure I'm looking at this right. Yeah, on the 7th, when school resumes, you'll probably see your next section given out. I'll probably give another mass email to your school emails and parents' emails for what's going to happen now that this section's over. Okay. All right. Last thing, free response. There's three questions here. Each one might have a couple different parts to doing it. But for the free response, the first one, this is like a heftier one. Explain at least 3 parts of the slave code and why you think America allowed this. 3 parts of the slave code and why you think America allowed this. Now, there's a ton of parts of the slave code. We talked about this in the section of slavery, a ton. So any of them could count. That they couldn't own property, they can't be out after dark, they can't congregate with other slaves. That alone is good. But if you can remember other ones, that they can't carry a firearm, they can't strike a white person, they can't marry, they couldn't testify in court against a white, they couldn't learn how to read or write, they could be killed if they were just in the role of being punished, and they had crude cottages, they worked 6 days a week, 18 hours a day. Any of that of the slave code counts. You just got to list 3 things of it. And the second part of it is definitely you having an opinion, doing an evaluation on it, right? So if the basic ideas of learning is recall, and then synthesis and analysis and evaluation, if that's the basic 4, if you want to look at it that way. Evaluation, I'm asking you to say why. There's no real right or wrong answer about it. I can imagine, I wish we could have a discussion on this. I think they probably allowed this to happen because it was part of a trade system. And economically, it's easy to look the other way because you're earning money from this. That's probably an answer. You could say federalism. All the good that we have with federalism also has this ugly head reared because states were allowed to sort of do this stuff. And that's why they were. States got to say on the local level. So that's another answer too. So federalism, or that economically benefited them. I do ask that you, because this is a tough topic, right? And it's a disconnected course, I do ask that you don't get too harsh and judgments and so forth. Either way, because it'll get lost in translation. And I don't want to assume the worst of you, wow, that was a really hot take without understanding the background of it. But give me your opinion. Why do you think the U.S. allowed this slave code system? Or slavery in general. Okay. Question 32. I'm giving these questions the next free response question. And each of these free response questions should probably be a paragraph. Describe what the Trail of Tears was in detail. Define genocide and explain whether you think the Trail of Tears was genocide or not. So again, I'm having you tell me, describe what the Trail of Tears was. Very simple. And that's a 600-mile, 800-mile trip from Georgia into Oklahoma, that they compelled at least 4 different groups. I do ask that you can name those groups, Choctaw, Chickasaw, Cherokee, Creek, the 4 C's, if you want to call it that. A lot of them were compelled, mainly Cherokee, to go from Georgia to Oklahoma. That's Trail of Tears. There you go. Federal troops forced them to do it. You can add more detail. They're split into 1,000 people groups of the Cherokee, and they had all the federal troops there, sort of watching them, forcing them to march in the 7,500 or so. You can mention that half of them died. Okay, defining genocide. We alluded to it. Defining genocide is the systematic eradication of a group based on some ethnicity, religion, creed, or code. Right? That's genocide. It's a systematic extermination of a people based on a ethnicity, creed, code, classification. Right? That's the generic definition of genocide. Knowing that about genocide, that's what you can regurgitate. Then I'm asking you to do an evaluation, your own opinion. Do you think this was actually, by those definitions from the Geneva Accords, a genocide? Probably not. I mean, this is your opinion. Probably not, because it killed half of the Cherokee, yes. It was more of a land grab than a targeted extinction of a people. It was more of a means to an end. Whereas even if you would compare it to Hitler or the Armenian genocide, they weren't using it for land. They wanted to have a ethnic purification. That's not what Andrew Jackson was about. But you could make the argument that for the Cherokee Nation, it was. For the Creek Nation, it was. Not for Native Americans as a whole. Right? You can make that argument either way. Most historians would say it's probably not. But I want you guys to evaluate and give that opinion. Meaning, I don't want you to say, no, it wasn't genocide, period, moving on. For you to get credit, no, it wasn't a genocide because it was more of a land grab by the federal government and not just targeted at an individual group because they wanted to be vindictive. That, you got to give me backing behind it for you to get credit. Okay, our last question here. And I know that in the competition between, as I look out to my non-existent students, Gracie versus Oliver in a battle royale of who would get it. Explain 3 reasons why Andrew Jackson was called the people's president. There's several reasons here. There's 4 or 5 of them, but I just need 3. One is he had a big block of cheese in his foyer to try to encourage people to come see him. That shows that he was the people's president. Under his rule, he allowed, not he, but the country, most states allowed all white men, whether landholding or not, the chance to vote. For Inauguration Day, he allowed people to come in mass. Doesn't matter who, whatever you were from, come on in if you're white. Drink it up. They trashed the White House. That's an example of them being like the People's Party. He's the father of the Democratic Party in a lot of ways because he was definitely the people's president and he wanted to represent them, the majority, for better or worse. And I think... and the last thing, I guess the 5th thing is spoil system. He was so devout to the people that even when he won, he started this idea of my personal staff, out with the old, in with the new. Not department or state level agencies, cabinet level agencies, not those. Those stay from usually president to president, but local staff, his personal staff, changed. So any of those things would be good. All right, I am telling you right now, that's the test. That's the test. So please study that. I will send out this document of the test on Tuesday, and then your job is by the end of the day to send it in to me, right? On your honor, don't use notes or this module as you're doing it. I'm trusting that you'll do it unassisted. No parents, no whatever, podcasts. You do it unassisted. So there it is. Have a good weekend. You'll see an email updating this stuff on Monday as well. Thanks. Bye.